Couple things to make note of. I looked at your next group, and it goes all the way up to page 237, but there's nothing for you to identify on page 237 when you look at it. But what we want you to look at is these two. These are part of vertebrae, okay? So what happens when it comes to the first two cervical vertebrae, which there are 7, okay? You have the atlas and the axis, and one of the things that we want to make sure that we know this is, if we're telling you that now, you're going to have to know this in, I don't know, a year, 2 years, whenever you would take this class in college. And with that, we want you to have some familiarity. I think that's how you would say it. I'm not the best at articulating that. Okay, so this is one word, one identification: sternal extremity, the shaft of the rib, the head of the rib, the neck of the rib, and the facet of the rib. Okay, so all of these are all found on page 237. Okay, because they're not on there. I want to make sure to give you plenty of time to get that content down then. Okay. And another aspect that I think is important to go over these is that a lot of times the identification on these bones, they don't even have a particular name. It might be just something in common, okay? Like there's a body of each individual rib, and that's where you have cartilage in between there. So that would be a common structure that's on each bone, because we never had anything like this on your first identification. So that's why we want to make sure we have that opportunity to see that information. So one of the things to keep in mind, the first two cervical vertebrae, one is called the atlas. You're going to want to know, and that is on your list. No. Yes, this is one term: sternal extremity, shaft, head, neck, and then facet of the rib. I didn't want to get so far down that we wouldn't be able to see that. Okay. So again, when we look at the first two cervical vertebrae, from the superior side to a little further down the inferior side, the atlas and the axis, make sure you know the difference between those two. So, do you think the axis is on top or the atlas? But your head is able to swivel, though. Was that just a guess? Okay, because that is right. The atlas actually is on top. And one of the ways that we know that, because on that atlas, okay, what's the big opening at the base of the skull? Foramen magnum. And there's a couple structures that surround the bottom of that. Because what bone is that to the posterior side? Occipital condyles. So those two structures then articulate with the facet of occipital condyle, and that will help you identify which one is which. And that's another reason that that's important. If you know that the atlas is on top, which it is, well then it's got to articulate with the facet of the occipital condyle. So this one is on the atlas, okay, and then the rest of these are just how they articulate with one another, stacking like poker chips. Then the axis is the second cervical vertebrae. All right. Does everyone have this content? All right. So now number 1 is in the books. Okay. I just got to put it in for an evaluation. I've not done that yet. Now we got everyone caught up to speed for the most part. And not that it makes it any easier, but you know the content that's coming, It's just trying to find a way to organize that, okay? And hopefully it's our, well, duty, and it's our job, and it's our goal to help you be able to organize these, become successful on the second step. Because we want to separate the haves and the have-nots. We want you to be the haves. Okay, so what are some functions of bone? That's what we're going to be talking about today. What have we talked about? There are 5. Okay. Provide support, that's 2. Create movement by making levers, and that's, I think, where we had left off with. The other 2 are in an indirect aspect because it's on the inside of the diaphysis. So what type of bone, it's on a long bone, so what type of bone surrounds the medullary cavity? So it's not at the ends, it's in the middle because we said it's the diaphysis. So what type of bone is that? Compact or spongy? It is compact bone because on the end where the epiphyseal plate is where you'd have spongy bone then. So that would be another function of that because inside that medullary cavity is what? I don't think we wrote it down, at least not yet, but because we said you had to answer correctly. What are dogs trying to get inside to get at? Yeah, get at the bone marrow. Because 1, it produces blood cells, and 2, it also stores minerals. Okay. I don't know if that's where we begin, or is it here? I think this is where we left off with. We have not. Okay. So this is where we left off with then. Oh, so we're right the first time. Okay. Oh, this is the last thing. Okay. I didn't think we got that far. So when we're looking at this type of body movement, what type of joints, yes, they're freely movable, but if you could be a little more specific, what type of joints do you think would be in there? And here, especially these 2. Yeah, because kind of like a door swivels on a hinge. Fingers go like this, and then thumbs, of course, you can do that, okay? So, of course, you wouldn't answer a question, how's it going? You don't do that. You might do that. You wouldn't do that because we want to say, well, and we don't know. We've just started this semester, so hopefully we're starting the 2nd week. And progress, that's the main idea we're trying to articulate. Now, one of the aspects with this, how many muscles are in your fingers? It's a trick question. There are none. Was that a guess, or did you know that? Okay, yes, that is true. There are no muscles in your fingers. And how would you know that? You can feel that in your forearm, all the connective tissue. Kind of like, say, piano wire, maybe. I think that's how keys work in a piano. You're pressing down on the keys, and it shoots the piano wire back there, so what would you call it, the hammer strikes something on the inside. Okay. Is there anything? How about this? No? No? You don't have any of this. Oh. Okay. Okay, that's what you see next on your paper. Okay, well, I need to close the gap here, but okay, we can, as far as this is concerned, we can stop there for today. And we'll go ahead and look at, now where's my controller? I can just shut it off up here. Okay. So we'll go ahead and take a peek at this. So my battery power is running low. Okay. I guess we don't have to have it over there. We can just do this. Okay. Yeah, there we go. I think that will work. Okay. Did you ever discuss the breakdown of the different vertebrae in health class? Is that the last time you would have seen this content? Okay. So with that, okay, one of the aspects that we see then, I think we're still all right with that. Okay. Is it better, would you rather just go over this content on your own in the book, or do you think it's beneficial to go over it on? Let me ask you that. Okay, so the first 7 are your cervical vertebrae. Okay, so we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Might not have got that right. No, I did not. I was off by 1. Okay, but some, what do I want to say, structures they have in common, okay, is that when it sticks out to the side like this, it's a process, and we call that the transverse process. All of the vertebrae have that in common, okay, and it's got a very irregular shape to it, which it has to because otherwise movement would not be possible, because these structures that stick out, there's a reason for that muscles actually attach to those, okay? So we got transverse processes that stick out all the way down from the cervical, all the way down to your 5 lower lumbar vertebrae, okay? Now, what is it that travels through the center here of your vertebral column? Yes, your spinal cord does, so that's the function of protection. This is the function of movement then, because it provides sites for muscle attachments. But if that spinal column is going through there, is there anything shooting out to the sides? And the answer to that is yes. And what would that be? That's branching off of this portion of your central nervous system. As far as the nervous system is concerned, though. If this is your central nervous system, your peripheral nervous system. So on each one of these, if we are saying C4, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, it could very well be the 4th nerve off of the cervical vertebrae. That's why it's referred to as C4. And what happens is there is a hole there, and what is it that means hole? Just like you said earlier with this, if this is the foramen magnum, which it is, foramen and foramina actually means hole, then what is it that's branching off of there? Well, it's the spinal column, but we call it a vertebral foramen. Let me look a little closer here. Because I think you need to get a different view. Oh, transverse foramen. Okay. So it's not only just a transverse process that sticks out on the side, but transverse foramen. That actually means hole. And that's where part of your central nervous system branches off to your peripheral nervous system, because, and it is very unfortunate that if someone could very well, unfortunately, break part of their spinal column, they could very well lose function anything below, let's say, T5. So if we have cervical vertebrae, we've got thoracic vertebrae, and then lumbar. So then T5 is just identifying the 5th thoracic vertebrae. Okay? And then again, there are 5 lower lumbar vertebrae. And one of the things that they all have in common, okay, in between each one of these, it's called the body. And that's all you have to identify it as. It's not body of lumbar, it's not body of cervical vertebrae, it's not body of thoracic, it's just body. That's it. Okay? Do we think we might know the difference between the classification of these ribs? There are 3 types of ribs. Barbecue, baked, and that's one. False ribs and floating. That's correct. Okay? So if that's how you classify them, do you think you can tell the difference between them? The true ribs. How would you know we're looking at true ribs on here? It has something to do with this structure here. Yeah, but then these do as well. These are your false ribs, okay? And the reason we call it that is because these don't have a direct attachment to the sternum here. It's only the first, 6? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, okay? So the first 6 are called your true ribs. Then anything past that, notice that this is just cartilage attaching to this rib here. So these are false ribs then. Again, the only reason is because they don't have a direct attachment to the sternum here. And then, like you correctly said, no anterior attachment for these are your floating ribs. Okay? So we got true, then false, and then floating, just like what you had said. Of course, there are 3 parts to this sternum. Okay? So if you're talking about the whole thing, yes, that is the sternum. The top portion is called the manubrium. The middle, just like what these were called, in between each vertebrae is a very vague term as what? Starts the B, the body. So this also has a body. It's beneath the manubrium, but above the xiphoid process. And this process here is just cartilage, okay? But there are 3 parts to your sternum. The body, manubrium, and xiphoid process, that's 3, and then just the whole thing is called the sternum itself. All right, so I think that's probably just a good place to stop as any, so we can continue with this tomorrow.